Yaron?
I just want to point out that I'm not going to be in a very good mood because I have to do tires right after we get done with this. I have to go do tires on a clapped out cruise, and I have no desire to do tires. We're so backed up. I have to do tires and then possibly an oil change on a truck on a 4-post lift.
Oh,
and it's so tall. I'm short,
and you've got to do the evaluation too.
Yes, so I have to do the inspection. So I thought
on a 4-post
on a 4-post lift.
I think we need to get you a UVI system, David.
Oh, there you go.
No,
look, David, this would fix
Unless
all
it's
the
got
problems.
robots. Unless it's got robots.
Or you need a robot to change the tires instead of you. Yeah. There's something that I actually saw that does that, but yeah.
Well, so it's really interesting. I have a Volkswagen on this side of me that needs a head gasket. And I'll share the pictures and the videos later. But like you can literally, we put a borescope in the cylinder and can see water running down in the cylinder. And Volkswagen completely missed it, right? It's been to Volkswagen twice. And they said, hey, it's got low oil pressure. Can you tell us why? Like the warning light keeps coming on. And they said, it needs an oil change. That's all that's causing that. But we don't know where the coolant's going. So now the car comes to my shop and the oil looks like, I don't know, chocolate milkshake. And the water is like just pouring into the cylinder. When you hit the key, it goes, but like you can literally see the water running in with the borescope, right? And then there's another one. There's an Audi.
Did you get the crazy borescope with the thing?
I don't know. I don't know where it came from. I don't even know whose it is. But so like on the other side of the shop is an Audi, and they come in and they said, hey, it had this warning light on, but we went ahead and drove it up here, and now it says it's got reduced power. And Ryan brings the combustion gas meter in, and he's like, what does it mean when it says OL? And I said, well, it means it's over limit. What'd you do? Hold it in the tailpipe? And he's like, no, that was Doug. And I was like, oh, that sucks. So, Yaron, tell us about yourself.
Man, you didn't even get close
How
to that.
did you get here? He said he was changing it to Ron just for me. Come on, man.
Yeah, you can call me Ron.
The accent was on the wrong syllable. It's Yaron.
Syllable.
Yaron.
No, that's actually really good, David. It almost sounds French. Yeah. So as my name kind of tells, I'm not from the States, but I've been living here for over 2 years. I'm a partner and chief marketing at a company called UVI, originally from Israel, which is not a great place to be from these days, but that's a different topic.
Crazy stuff. Yeah.
Crazy stuff. Actually, I've been quite a few years with UVI, and as in an entrepreneurial story of creating scanners for cars. Basically, we create devices that takes pictures below and around vehicles, almost like an MRI for a car. And today working with some of the biggest car manufacturers in the world, like General Motors, like Volvo Cars, installed in hundreds of car dealerships, working with Amazon, working with CarMax, and basically automating inspection or just creating a really different experience for diagnosing exterior issues with vehicles. So that's in a nutshell.
I guess my biggest question is I'm always intrigued by how people got where they're at, right? And so how did you get here? Like, what did you always love cars? I mean, what led you down this pathway?
So the truth is, like, with me, it's a bit different because when I was 16 or 17 and I got my first car, which was my grandfather's Fiat 1988 Fiat Duna, which was manufactured in Brazil and had every kind of issue you could imagine. I once drove it on the highway and I ended up with a transmission stick in my hand. And another time I pressed the brake and it just tore in. And so I kind of, when I was 17, 18, 19, I fixed a lot of stuff myself. But then for many years, like really out of the car world, more in startups. The other partners or co-founders of the company actually are completely not from the car world. And when we started this in 2016, we actually developed a scanner for something very different, just to take pictures below cars to look for bombs when they're entering an embassy or a seaport or airport. And through the years, we had a pivot when car manufacturers started coming to us and said, hey, can we use AI and cameras and diagnose issues, was vehicles, and one thing led to another, and we're pretty much very unique in the world doing what we do today. So it's quite a nice story.
Explain the product then. It's UV and then EYE, correct?
Yeah, UVI, UV, EYE.
Yeah.
The name actually started from under vehicle eye. So UVI, under vehicle eye. And that's when we started creating these scanners, which were essentially, they were made to replace a guard or someone looking with a mirror below your car when you enter a sensitive facility. We just thought it's a much smarter way to look for bombs or drugs or anything illicit below a vehicle. And we just said, let's create a slate that you drive over with cameras, takes pictures below, and using AI and computer vision, which is analyzing those photos, we can learn how to detect anomalies and reconstruct the different components and the different areas of that underbody of the vehicle. And then after doing that, and pretty much selling to banks in Africa and seaports and airports that even here in the States were installed in a couple of places. Pretty soon after, we started having OEMs come to us and say, hey, can this scanner, this thing you're putting on the ground, can you put it in our plants and start looking for different screw angles and quality assurance issues when the car is coming off the conveyor belt? So then we said, okay, let's use the same methodology and let's look at tires, mentioning tires that David talked about earlier, whether it's sidewall issues, tread issues, not only depth, but cuts, scuffs, bulges, any kind of weird patterns, reading all the text on the side of the tire, and then an exterior kind of arc that you drive through that just takes, with 16 cameras, just take pictures all around the vehicle and reconstructs a 3D model of that car and finds scratches and dents. So we're kind of a full solution. Even inside, we also have an interior product that just drives through, takes pictures all around the vehicle, and keeps getting smarter and smarter in detecting issues, whether they are low tread depth or sidewall issues, but also leaks and broken parts and missing parts below. So, that's evolution.
That is so cool, because one of the things that we've talked about a lot is a way to scale what it is that we do. And in a lot of cases, right, our guys and the shop owners that are listening are going to say, well, I really like the idea of this, but I also like my guy being there. What about this replaces my guy? And it's consistency, right? Because that's some of the things I've noticed in the past couple of weeks where we've had some little misses, right? A little scratch on the side of a car. And in one of the pictures we took, you could see the scratch. The technician just didn't see the scratch. So when he took the picture, you couldn't clearly determine that was a scratch. And so we ended up paying to fix it, right? Mm-hmm. And it's things like that I think about that this would add a layer of standardization to, that would take away some of that requirement that the technician takes that picture perfectly every single time. It's not that we're depending on a human being to be without fault. It's that it's a systemized approach. It can be scaled. And I think that's really interesting.
Mm-hmm. I think that it's consistency and it's also transparency, because we didn't even talk about presenting a visual aid for a customer that naturally thinks someone is ripping him off, whether it's at the dealership or the repair shop, and suddenly a machine is saying something requires attention. So we can take that technician's time, and all of us, better than me, there's a big shortage with technicians today in the industry, and focus it on what they need to focus their talent on, and take that diagnosis and inspection, or at least the triage kind of experience out of it, in a consistent manner. Just like you said, it's a machine. It does the job every time the same way. And have that technician focus their time to quickly go and look at that area of the underbody that requires attention and actually diagnose what's going on there. So that's kind of the approach. It never replaces anyone. It just makes their life much quicker and easier and provides a much better and more reliable experience with the customer, I think.
Right. And I've seen just in this last week, I have a really great client. He's the manager of a country club in the area. And he's been coming to me for years. And David, you and I have talked about him in the past, and he loves his Audis. And so he has attempted to purchase 3 Audis from Carvana in the past 2 weeks. And every single one of them, December that works for me is from the body shop business. And so she's walking out to the car, and they delivered one yesterday. He's here. And she walks out and she's like, guys, it's been wrecked. And given I would have probably missed this. And she says, well, how would you have missed that? There's 4 inches of spray overlapping on the bottom of the windshield. It comes up over top of the windshield wipers. They didn't even take the wipers off the car. They sprayed them with the wipers on the car. Like, the paint looks terrible, all of these different aspects. And you think about that. Well, how is it that they're quality controlling? I see so many places that I think that a product like that could make sure that we're doing what we're supposed to do to the client's car. He's got one here right now that the strut's completely broken out of the strut tower, right? Like I'm talking about, I can reach in and move it. And even just driving over top of a camera that's taking a picture, you could easily see that strut was broken. So I'm thinking, gosh, there's a lot of different ways that could be utilized. David, are you going to get one for your shop? I guess that's the big question.
They don't look cheap. They don't look cheap at all.
Cut to the chase, huh? Actually, both in terms of the business model that we work with, repair shops and collision shops, that's a new use case we have, and dealerships, it's based on a monthly subscription fee. So it's pretty digestible. Yeah. So you don't need to pay $200,000 up front or something like sometimes you're used to in the industry for these, big machines. It's more of a software approach. So it's a monthly fee. It's varies between $6,000 to $7,000 a month. Okay, depends on volume, depends on specs, how many service lane, a few things that we work with you. And then if you utilize this right, I mean, this returns itself. Just on tires alone, which I can get to in a second, but within a week, you could probably make that back. I mean, I want to actually give you an incredible shift the conversation, because I know tires is a big thing, but I want to give you an incredible stat, which I'm not sure if you knew, that we actually pick up. So I mentioned we have an underbody scanner, tire scanners, and this exterior arc that you drive through, right? And once we scan and take pictures of the tires, we look for damages on the sidewall, which sometimes are missed, like chunks and things in the rubber and, bulges that stick out or whatever. And the tread one of foreign objects, uneven wear patterns and just worn out, tires is another thing. But what I find incredible is that we read all the text. Okay, so that's a pretty simple AI capability or camera capability to read text, right? And what we do is we slice the information and we look at the DOT. And I don't know if you guys knew that's around 10 to 15% on average, if we look at the whole of the United States. If you look by states, there's even crazier stats, but around 10 to 15% of tires are over 5 years old. So we have dealerships that are seeing 20, 25, 30% of tires coming through the door, 7, 8, 11, 12 year old tires. Now, all the OEs say that after 4 years, the rubber starts going bad. Okay? Yep. That's a safety recommendation. And we have got anywhere between 10 to 15% of people you're seeing coming through the door that you never get on your knees and check their DOT, that are driving potentially unsafe tires. So that's an immediate thing that we just bring to everybody's attention on a big touchscreen. You drove through Apple Store experience, like I like to say. You get out of your car, right, and then the advisor approaches you and say, hey, before the technician even does the multi-point inspection or puts it on a lift, here's the triage moment. Here are things that we're already seeing. And one of them, you've got 8-year-old tires. So, that's not safe. Obviously, the machine is saying it's not safe, or the OEs are saying it's not safe. Why don't we get you a full set, four tires in alignment just to start with? So,
right.
And I find that incredible. I mean, before moving here, I never imagined that such a big amount of tires are so old. Right. So that's one of the things we've been seeing with a lot of dealers.
That sounds about right. The tires that come in the door, people leave with them too. They're like, my tires are fine. Unbelievable,
right? Like you can literally see the cord through the cracks in the sidewall, and I'm even sitting here thinking about things like a spare, right? And the ability to look at an undercar spare. And I obviously know that's a kind of offshoot of what you're talking about. But how many times have we had a consumer that gets out on the road somewhere, gets a flat tire, And now that they've got to put the spare on, they realize the spare's blown out, the spare's flat, the spare's got issues, the spare's old. And they put that spare on, and then they go run and they have another blowout. I mean, in the past year, I've had 4 customers that put a spare on and then had a spare blowout on them. And we document that, hey, the spare is this old, and it's in our tire inspection. We put on there how old the spare is, what the spare looks like, what kind of pressure it has, what kind of condition it's in. And that's a way that we try to avoid them having to do that. But nobody ever thinks like, hey, I need a spare tire. Even if you put it on the recommendation, they're not thinking I need a spare. It's all right. It's a spare. I'll use it when I need it, right? And then you end up in a spot where you have another blowout, potential accident, all kinds of things that you look at when it comes to that. And, I think that one of the things we often say in the automotive industry is one of the things we lack is standardization. I think something like this brings a ton of standardization to the picture, because if we can get it set up to where it's doing the same thing consistently over and over and over again, giving the same images, the same picture, gosh, that adds a lot of standardization to a shop.
I'm thinking about the business plan. So the business aspect, all of a sudden you don't need the $12 an hour kid. I don't even think they make $12
the check-in
guy. $15. The MPI guy. Yeah. You don't need the kid. So they scan the car, it identifies it needs tires, it identifies leaks, and it says at that point there you can then go immediately to the B-Tech. Hey, we need teardown. Hey, we need to do a $100 diagnostic process or whatever. We need to do an in-depth inspection because you've got leaks. You've got it. I'm sure it can identify at least visible bushing issues on the suspension. How far does it take it with checking things like alignment? I know it can do an interior scan. Explain that process too. That sounds interesting.
So the thumb rule is, as long as a person would have been able to see it, we will be able to see it. That's kind of a thumb rule. Okay, if something's inside, internal, covered, unless it leaks out or whatever, we won't be able to detect it. I'll start with alignments and then I'll speak about interior. So alignments, we don't, classic kind of equipment, which I'm sure you guys know, to check for alignments or tread, usually use lasers. We do something very different because we are based on computer vision, okay, which is taking those high-res photos and then analyzing them. So specifically with alignments, the way we do it is we measure hundreds of kind of points on each of the tread valleys, okay? And then we have a patented ability to look at the depth of the shadow there to see if it's worn out or not and assume how much it's worn out. And then if we see uneven wear patterns between the valleys themselves on a tire or between the two sides, we know that most probably there's an alignment issue. So that's the way we do that. So according kind of seeing the variation between the patterns and if there is a difference. And that does most of I would say, that's a very reliable way to understand there's an alignment issue. And then the second thing is, you mentioned is interior. So actually, earlier this year, CarMax announced with us that they are rolling out our devices throughout all of their wholesale network. That's 1 million vehicles a year to scan. So we're in a few dozens of their sites. And one of the things they wanted to do is to really compress that appraisal and reconditioning time, because they're like a factory. They buy and sell trades, one after another. It's a fantastic kind of, just to see it sometimes when, they're busy sites. Yeah. And we have managed to reduce that time from, between at least 7-8 minutes reducing per vehicle. And part of that, if you want to look at a complete condition report, so you have a car drive through, the associate opens the door. Instead of going around with the phone, taking pictures, opening the hood, doing those kind of things, it just drives through. They open the door. We've got a new product that you just put a little camera between the driver and the passenger. You close the door. If you can even record the engine, and that's around a minute to populate a full 360 of the interior of that vehicle, plus OBD codes, fault codes by Bluetooth, plus sound recording of the engine, plus any more snaps you want to take. So that interior product, which, by the way, if you guys want to philosophize and speak a little bit a level up, how do we apply AI to this world and robots and, machines supposedly taking over? This is a way of how we look at each and every application and say, how can we do something good with it? And teach a machine to be consistent and help us, right? So in this case, CarMax wanted, or other clients as well, we've got quite a bunch in the auction world today, wanted to really have that full reconditioning or condition report, including inside. So we said, okay, what's the quickest tool to get a 360 inside? One of the things we will add down the line as it keeps getting smarter is even tears inside the seats and stains and things like that as well. Wow. So every image we grasp, every sensor we would add, we will be able to analyze it. Speaking about sound that I mentioned, we want to be able to also analyze frequencies of other kind of issues, the timing belt or the water pump or even brakes. If we can analyze different trends in the frequencies of the sound, we won't replace anyone needing to listen to that or go have a proper look, but we will give you enough information to make the whole process, or at least the check-in process, much quicker for both sides.
So, you talk a little bit about that and talking about machine learning, right? And that's always fascinated me, because one of the things that when I started my shop that I was doing, right? And David, you probably remember this. I had an old Modus, like the original Modus with the 2-channel scope, the whole 9 yards, or it was 4-channel. And so what was interesting about what I would do is I would capture waveforms for everything, right? And it was when I was small enough of a shop and I wasn't making any money anyway, so it didn't matter. And so I was just going around probing every single car, capturing data from it, and then I saved all that data. And to this day, I have this giant database that I go back and I'll look at the information. And one of the things that we've seen in our shop now is that we're starting to pick up some NVH sensors and some pulse sensors and some other sensors that capture different aspects of the data from the automobile. And one of the ones that's been most interesting to me is seeing Eric take one of the magnetic NVH sensors and put it on something like a water pump on this car, and then put it on a water pump of another car that's similar, right? Has the same water pump, same engine, whatever it may be. And then all of a sudden we have this database that now the next time that car comes in and we wonder, is that noise the water pump? Is it the tensioner? What is that? Guess what? We're starting to build a database that we can come back and drop that sensor right on that and say, wow, that's a lot louder than the last one I listened to. Now, that's a lot of work, right? To capture that much data. When we talk about machine learning, especially when it comes to NVH or noise, vibration, and harshness, is that something that it has the ability to learn into and start to push that edge and say, is it, what's the NVH app, David, that's on Google Play Store? You know what I'm talking about? The guy from Weber State University built it. And it's an NVH app that you drop in your car. It's on your cell phone. You drop your cell phone in the center console and you put in the information about the vehicle, the tire size, all of that stuff. It uses GPS and uses other data as you're driving it to capture the vibrations in the car. And it says that's a first order, second order, third order, or fourth order vibration. And there's only these things in the car that will vibrate like that. That's all it can be. Yeah, it's a badass app, dude. You got to check it out. It is so cool because it'll come down and say that's
setup.
No, this is way better than that. Way better. What? And so it'll pop up and it'll tell you, hey, that's got to be a tire. There's nothing else that can be. That is a tire. That is all that can vibrate like that. And so it'll give you the probabilities of what percentage and all of that. And I just think, is AI or machine learning capable of pulling that kind of data in? I mean, obviously, I know that's outside of the scope of what you're talking about here. But how much machine learning can it do? Or is this all manual input? How do you...
So... First of all, you're giving great examples. And I mean, when you speak about machine learning, deep learning, whether it's in sound frequency or in computer vision, which is the art of analyzing imagery, I think that the capabilities are pretty limitless, but there's different approaches to it. So the more classic approach, which is more machine learning, is catalog based, right? And that's something that, by the way, in our early days was something we were trying to solve. And kind of stands us out until today. So let's say you want, you have your examples of the different sounds and what could they be, right? So you need endless catalogs to fetch that info from. And just as an anecdote, when we started and we were looking for bombs or threats below vehicles, you could imagine we didn't have a catalog of all the improvised IEDs in the world, and we didn't have a catalog of all the models and underbodies of vehicles in the world, and match that anomaly of catalog versus catalog. And that's classic machine learning of saying, here's how it's supposed to look like, let's fetch it. What we're talking about in terms of smart AI or smarter AI is more around the world of deep learning. Deep learning is kind of a black box. Okay, so let's say our approach in the challenge of looking into the underbody of a vehicle is not to understand how every single underbody looks like. It's giving that black box and that algorithm enough data to try and reconstruct the underbody, not according to a catalog, meaning in our case, we did something called semantic segmentation. So we look at an underbody, we assume where each component is, the exhaust, the chassis, the muffler, and we almost have a heat map of the areas of the different components. If we put EVs aside, which is a different story, but let's say in a typical kind of ICE vehicles are pretty much the same. By the way, if it's sometimes when it's a bus, it's a truck, it's whatever it is, you'll be able to kind of find those components. And what we did is, this was 2016, so a while back, we kind of took most of the rental cars in Israel, paid to get them, drove them over this device, and showed our algorithm enough exhaust pipes and enough mufflers and enough chassis to kind of try and reconstruct that. We don't know how. The shape, the color, the texture. And once it had enough data to do an average reconstruction, which showed an ideal muffler or close to an ideal muffler, we were be able to start comparing. And again, we don't know how it would do it because it's just feeding it enough data to try and recreate it according to all these different, mathematical kind of, I would say, parameters and color variations and whatever. But once it was good enough to do a reconstruction, which was close enough to the real thing, we would be able to start showing it the real-time image of the car driving over. And if there was a big enough difference, we'd say, okay, something's sticking out there. And once we saw 50 things which are the same, sticking out equals plastic bag. So obviously people are involved in this learning process of tagging, of understanding, of false positives, false negatives. But that's in a nutshell kind of how you build the deep learning engine. It gets much more complex than that and changes per issue, per area of a vehicle in our world and what we're talking about. If it's different applications, there's probably much smarter and things that I can't even talk. I won't be able to talk about because I don't know them that well. But that's creating these black boxes and feeding them and then tweaking them, aligning them. That's how you create a deep learning or machine learning. Again, if it's more catalog based, but kind of engine.
That is insane, and I think we've. The reason I say it's insane is because we've just now kind of started to get our minds around machine learning, right? We've just now started to understand what that looks like, especially as the auto repair industry, and see how that's affecting us and impacting the industry as a whole. And then to add that aspect of it is just absolutely insane to me, right? Like, because I even think even at a deeper level, and not just at the analysis level, but into a full diagnostic level, right? And so, David, you've always talked about the in-cylinder captures, and that you're training this guy, and so he needs to look at this, and he looks for this anomaly, and he says, oh, there's a little hump here, and that means this, right? And we always depend on Brandon Steckler. I just send it to me like, hey, dude, does this look right to you? Thanks. I'll put your sticker on the back of my laptop. You're a smart guy. But what happens when the Brandon Steckler's gone? What happens when the Brandon Steckler can't answer the question? Well, I mean, is that a case for something like this, David? Do you think that it could eventually grow to that level, that kind of deep learning that it does to look for the anomaly? Is that possible?
I don't know why somebody hasn't done it already. Like, how many
good known goods fire all your technicians?
No. I'm saying, like, you take all your known goods, yeah, and then feed it into some algorithm. Someone's going to have to write the algorithm, but you want to feed into the algorithm to identify, hey, these are known goods. As we feed you more information, identify and contrast it versus the known good. That's all the human's doing, right? And so they should be able to, somebody should have written this. I don't know. Some of the wealthier shop owners get on this. I just want a small cut.
There you go.
I just want a little slice. Teeny tiny slice. That's all. I just want a teeny tiny slice for coming up with the idea. Just feed it into the algorithm, run the software. You capture, somebody still has to do the capturing. And what this UVI thing does, that's awesome. It'll identify a weird noise. Hey, this engine sounds like a Hyundai engine and it's louder than it should be. Don't take this car. And so, yeah, now they come back and, hey, the machine said your engine's about to blow up. What are you talking about? Anyway, we can't take your car. Goodbye. And then they don't trade the car in. They move on. Somebody else gets stuck with it, but not CarMax. They're not putting in engines.
Well, and so I think about that, right? Is like the level of noise coming from the engine, and we have this many examples of good engines that don't make a noise or whatever it may be, right? And so it copies that and says, hey, I can look at this and can tell that this is different. This is an anomaly in that case, and so therefore I make this recommendation. The data that's available from the car now, right? And from the DLC, and I know that we're going to see changes with EV and everything else, but the data that's available. When was the code last cleared, right? Like a Ford sets a code just for code clears, and the monitors
they've
haven't
always been
relearned.
able to have that. But think about,
I understand.
Think about the Hemis. Think about the Hemis with the good old Hemi tick.
Yep.
They can identify that, hey, this is a Hemi. Look, I don't know how many used car dealers are grabbing beautiful, clean, been driven only 70,000 mile Hemi equipped Chrysler 300s and Rams. They all are about to blow up, all of them. And so that machine can pick up that Hemi tick and say, hey, this thing has got the Hemi tick, and maybe you don't sell the warranty with that one, or you know that, hey, this is going to blow up, maybe we don't take this car on. I don't know, it just mitigates the risk of selling a turd. Maybe you'll see fewer Chrysler 300s on the used lots. I don't know.
Let me actually jump in and give you two more examples if you're speaking more about the sales side that are super interesting. One, and that's another form of AI, once you have big data, which you guys mentioned in a few examples, but you have a lot of numbers, okay? You understand things that are recurring, trends that are recurring. We see variations of a set of tires on a certain model and make, obviously, of a variation of 2% to 15% of wearing out. So if you only knew which set of tires is most least to wear out, right, on the service side, but, you know, obviously also when you get the car, that's one thing. And another thing that's really interesting, that's more in the trade appraisal side. So when dealers install this, and that, I don't know what you guys do, but and if you take trades, but I found it also insane that no one puts the car in a lift, and then you give it a Kelly Blue Book kind of figure and say, okay, this car is this year, this model, this mileage, this is what it's worth. And 3 days later, you get it at the shop, and you're like, you know, obviously if a cat converter is missing, you're going to hear it. But other than that, you might find weird and wonderful things. And I'm sure you guys have seen examples in the past. And the moment you have a UVI, almost like a virtual lift system, you drive over every single trade, you're able to find those issues below. Customer appreciates transparency if there's something really wrong. But then we had more parameters. And I know I'm jumping to a few things, but we even developed kind of a heat map around rust. So we can show you rust patterns and how is that compared to what it should be at this year. And is it in the Northeast and there's snow on the road, or climate, or do we need to devalue that trade more? Because that's going to do something if there's really bad rust patterns in this area. So I think it's just, you know, it's just more and more information and
that's
digestible
a good and bad, though. That's a good and bad. You think about, you have two dealerships in Pennsylvania, let's say. One has your UVI system, one does not. That car comes in, they scan it, and they don't take the trade. Or they say, hey, I can only offer you $5,000, not $7,500, because that car has an immense amount of rust underneath, and I can't fix that. Like, it's going to take too much to recondition. They take that same car, they run down to the dealership down the street that doesn't have the UVI system. They don't scan it. They see it's a nice, clean car. They don't give it to craps. And so, yeah, we'll give you $7,500. Now, that's going to end up burning the dealership on the back end. But from a consumer standpoint, they're going to look at that dealership a little cockeyed. They're going to be like, hey, what's up with this dealership here not offering me the full $7,500 I was expecting? The dealership might be like, I don't care. Like, I just saved myself a huge headache scanning this car.
But you're kind of giving very specific examples on the capabilities today and human nature, which sometimes is to be a crook, right? We assume that people, on one hand, sometimes have the tendency to crook each other out, but on the other hand, they appreciate transparency long term. In every data point, you know, what we're seeing with UVI is that, look at service, right? We have dealerships with, $800-900 ROs a month, okay, that are making north of $12,000 a week just from selling services that they found on UVI. Maybe the guy came for the car wash. He didn't even know he needs a full set of tires because they're a 9-year-old. But it's not only that they're paying more, the close rate is 91%. So 91% of clients, before the write-up, when you show them a visual issue, even if it's not been fully diagnosed yet by the technician, they're likely to say yes. So people are spending more money, and they're happier to spend more money.
A leg up, right? It's giving your advisor a leg up.
Exactly, but but that's on the service side. If you speak on sales, long term, that Pennsylvania dealership is going to say, "Hey, next door they have that. I want that as well." Or not even UVI. I need to make a better decision. And the customer is going to say, "Well, 3 of the dealerships around, which gave me a quote, found there is rust below my vehicle. Yeah, I can go and trick the 4th one." But how many times am I going to get away with that? So something in, once you standardize things, like Lucas said earlier, also human behavior aligns with it. And in the end, let's be,
there'll be a shift for sure.
Let's believe in the greater good of people as well, right? A little bit.
For sure. We're too jaded for that nonsense.
Listen, David just compares the world to himself, and so we're all screwed by David's side. I do want to bring this up because I think it's interesting. I've been talking the past couple of weeks. I've made some reels and stuff, and talking about like how blessed we are to live in the country we live in. Right, David, you sent me a message the other day talking about it. That like, hey, just the fact that I live here gives me great opportunity that I wouldn't have elsewhere. Right, and the story you were telling, David, was terrible and it was sad, and I hate you for even sending it to me. But I guess my point is like the fact that there are other countries in this world that we obviously all know about, but we're disconnected from the fact that we would need a machine to tell you if there was a bomb under a vehicle. Right? That is just how many of them did you actually find? What type of
I mean, I can't disclose these contracts are very sensitive. What I can tell you is that we found pretty much really weird things. Like smuggling of all sorts, weapons. If you look at the mechanical side, you also find really, screwed up things that people do below vehicles with chicken wires and very weird improvised things. So it doesn't have to be security for that. Right. Yeah. But America's not a bad place to live
in North Carolina at this point, right? Because if you're finding chicken wire under vehicles, that was a North Carolina car. I guarantee
I can check for you. I'll check. Yeah, we actually have quite a bunch of installs there, so maybe. So yeah,
that's crazy. And so let me ask you this: the data that's captured, one of the things that often comes up is what's done with that data, and in this case, it doesn't seem like there's any identifying data associated with it. Does it capture VIN and everything? How much of that data is captured?
So we capture a license plate. That's the only kind of personal information, I would say, data that we capture. And that is connected to the VIN number. We have a VIN decoder that finds that from the DMV. And then we can pull up recalls, trim information, all of those kind of things about the vehicle as well. And that helps us also down the line cross-reference vehicle history. So if you're a repair shop or dealership owner, whether it talks with your DMS or not, but which we do have some integrations, but you're able to kind of say, okay, give me the last 2 years and show me that vehicle. that's one aspect of the data, depending on the cloud storage that the client or the dealership or the shop wants. What we do with the data is more interesting because we keep improving our algorithm, and we keep getting feedback from technicians and advisors of a thumbs up or thumbs down or something that we found or didn't find. And the more we process images, and just to give you the scale of it, we are scanning now north of 300,000 vehicles every month today.
Holy cow.
So
that's insane.
A lot of vehicles, and we get smarter all the time. We keep adding detections, we keep adding new things that clients ask or shops ask for that will make their time easier. One of the things that we added a few months ago was rim damage and variation of rim damage. And that is for two things. One is policy, obviously saying you damaged the rim. And two is, and I don't know what's your take on all this world of EVs or future of EVs, but when we look at services declining or less things to do below, you would want to find more extra services that a shop or a dealership could do, right? Which obviously EV less components. So one of the things we're seeing is shops getting in-house wheel restoration. So if you take every single customer coming through the door and saying, hey, you got a pretty nasty damage on your rim. Look here, it's picked it up. Do you want to restore your rim or your wheel for $250? A new one would be $900 or $800. There's a pretty decent uptake on that. And that's a new source of revenue, a new source of interaction with the customer. So we keep adding those detections that give you the added value.
I look back at everything that you could do with this, right? And all the directions it could go. Remember when thermal cameras first came out, we were analyzing cats with thermal cameras. We've heard talk of different ways to analyze some of the new battery technology using thermal cameras. I mean, think about, who was it? Was it the gentleman from Hella, David, that was talking about that they had to build in the UK a system to analyze EV batteries because they had to determine the health and the life of the EV battery before the vehicle
remaining
was sold.
life left. Yeah.
Right. And that's unbelievable to me. That's so crazy. And so then you begin to think like you could incorporate something like that into this. You could incorporate thermal checks of a battery and thermal checks of things under the vehicle in the long term. There is so much to add to that. Now, do you guys go to any like trade shows like ASTE or Apex Vision, any of those? Do you go to those shows?
So our main focus has been in the past, like the more innovation tech ones like CES, and we've been a few years in the NADA, the National Dealer Association one, which is a really big one for us. We're looking into SEMA and those kinds as well, but the rest are mainly kind of more internal brand events. So we have, I didn't mention it before, so we have 4 OEMs that invested in us, which are General Motors, Volvo, Hyundai, Toyota, and then CarMax are also strategic investors. We've got a really big relationship with Amazon. Just announced a few weeks ago that they are going to install this in pretty much most or all of their Amazon Prime delivery station network. So that's a really big deal. So we try and do a lot of internal events. Just a couple of months ago, we went to Vegas and we were in the annual kind of General Motors Chevy event, the Buick GMC one, the Volvo service event. So we kind of mainly try and work a lot around those networks. Trade shows here and there, it depends on the opportunity. And
for sure. I'm telling you, I would love to see something like this at Apex. I just think because it's such a big show, there's room for it and you could see it, you could experience it. But, the place I'm surprised I've not seen it is Tool Tech. You know it? I mean, right, David? Would that not be the coolest place to see this technology in use at a show like that? Because that's
the company showing up to Tool Tech would probably make sense for sure. To see what they.
But leave shows. I mean, at the end of the day, right now we're at if you go to our website, you'll see there's a Find Us map. We have north of 300 systems in car dealerships today. Across all the states. I mean, less in the West Coast, but a big presence in the Midwest, Northeast, Florida, Texas. Carolinas. So I would advise, I mean, if anyone or yourselves obviously as well, if you want to see a system real life, I mean, I don't need to sell it to you. You guys can just pop into a dealership and drive your car through and see what it does.
That's really cool. So when we talk about installing something like this, what are some of the requirements for the facility, right? Because that was one of the things that stopped me when I built my new shop, right? I wanted a shop. I didn't want to have like a pull-through shop. I wanted to have doors that were open for everybody. Everybody had their own door. And there's advantages and disadvantages to that. We live in an area that has 100-mile-an-hour winds. So this time of year, we open the doors and all the heat that I just paid to put in the shop comes right out the shop and goes out the other side. But, one of the things that we looked at was putting that hunter system in. And I said, man, there's just not anywhere to put that in my shop. Are there different ways to configure it? What are the space requirements, when you talk about that?
So let's start I would say, the bottom line is that we installed in so many places that we usually find a solution for any kind of issue. It just needs to be covered. We don't want rain or elements to disturb. If you have raindrops or something falling in between the scanner and the tire, for example, it could mess up the image. So it needs to be covered, which most service lanes are. Ideally, in terms of wind and those kind of things, there needs to be some kind of walls on the side, but that depends on the angle and the actual site. We usually just get a CAD drawing and do a site survey and look at it. So usually it's fine. So the width, if you think about it, it's 113 inches high, 146 inches width, and then the length is 70. So, and if you go to our website, you'll be able to see it and place it basically in your service lane. But it's usually, most cases it's straightforward. When it's not, we look at it. We have a version where we can, the underbody scanner, we have a version that is called, the name is Helios. It's named after Greek mythology, but the underbody scanner, we got a pro version, which is dug into the ground. So, if you don't have a basement below, let's say like Manhattan dealerships or others, we could dig into the ground. If not, we've got a version that is just, a bit raised above, a few inches, so we don't even need to dig. And we're pretty flexible. I mean, we come after hours at night, around a day and a half to 2 days, and that's it. And we, if there's 2 service lanes, we can do 2 next to each other. If there's one, there's one. If there's 3, we've even done 3. We're in, we're out, and we usually, most cases we can solve in terms of the logistics, I would say.
Right, absolutely. And so, we primarily talk to independent repair shop owners. Is this something that they can model into their businesses, right? Is this something that would fit into that, or is this really scaled for a bigger operation than the small shops? Do you have a kind of a limit, and you say, hey, look, unless you're this many bays, unless you do this much service, what's your target there?
I mean, yes and no. If somebody utilizes this correctly, we can run some numbers. The chance, if you put it right in the right place in the process, the chance for it not to pay itself is very slim. We do see a cutoff point of, I would say, the 300-400 repair orders a month. I mean, if you're a shop that does 100 and then a bit of oil job, if it's that small, it probably won't make sense. But anything that is north of definitely the 400 repair or 500 repair orders a month, and if you look at trades, I mean, if you take trades in, even if it's, 20, 30, 40 a month, if I find you in 2 or 3 out of those issues that you wouldn't have put it on a lift, plus things like policy that we talked about, which is rim damage, door damage, those kind of things, and we didn't even speak about body work yet. I mean, it's quite a lot of different pockets to pay this off, and especially when it's a monthly subscription. I mean, you guys know your kind of different monthly costs, so it's 6 or 7 grand, but then here's all the way 15% of people coming through, you'll probably sell more tires to them just because of expired, plus an alignment, which is usually good profit. Issues below, would you benefit from presenting that much earlier and more likely to sell because of it? I would say yes, and the stats show that yes. Wheel restoration, do you do something like that? Paintless dent, do you do something like that? Body work, I mean, we just announced a collision shop We're streamlining the estimates. We're reducing, shaving off a lot of minutes and wait time and annoyance for customers, and relationship with insurance providers on the collision side as well. So if you do body work, that's something that definitely adds efficiency. We even have dealers that, even if there are, or more, I would say, shops that might be lower volume, maybe you can sell scans to other shops around you or other fleets around you, right? So
for sure,
it's a lot of creative ways to pay it off. You just got to be entrepreneurial enough, see the benefits, see this vision, and usually the cost is not the main, I would say, pushback. Especially if you get it, if you I think that there's stores and dealerships that are maybe weaker in processes and educating people on doing something in a different way, and that's where you get most of the challenges of making sure everybody's using it, everybody's happy, everyone's not lazy doing so, right? That's right. People trusting a machine to do something. Sometimes we hear people, I've done this for 40 years, I don't need a machine. So that's where we find where we need to enforce the trust and work really well so everybody uses it.
For sure.
And if they do...
Is it modular?
Yeah.
Is it modular? Can you add like Artemis, but you start with the Helios and then you add Apollo later? Okay.
Yeah.
That's cool.
You can use... It depends on the site. We have dealers that... For some reason, their service drive isn't big enough, so they don't put Atlas Light, which is the ARC. They just have underbody and tires, for example. And so it's modular. You can do any kind of combination. We have dealers that have several lanes. For one lane, they take all three. That's where they run their trades. This can be used for merchandising as well and appraisal. We're just also launching this week a new appraisal tool. It's a new thing where you can put the reconditioning costs and send out a report directly to the customer saying your car is worth X and this is why, which is very straightforward. I don't understand why there isn't a tool that does it this way with detections, but so a lot of benefits, I would say, from multiple angles for sure.
And look, I hear you saying, well, if you're not running over 200 or 300 cars, and one of the unique things about a lot of the shops in our circles is we run lower car counts, right? We typically in 10 bays, I only run 150 cars a month, but they're $1,000 tickets, and so in that instance, I'm looking at the ways that I can cut time out. Right. And I can cut that. I can make sure that we have a solid, consistent process time after time after time. And one of the big things is my process takes an hour and a half, and it doesn't matter what it is. So that car is going to be in here for an hour and a half. So that I'm thinking how that speeds me up. It makes the customer happy. It gives us a more consistent approach and better data consistently time after time after time. That's a really interesting approach for sure.
Think of two things. One is, if you could hire a person for $6,000, okay, which is a decent salary, but it's not a $20,000 person, okay. So if you could hire a person for $6,000 to shave off half of the time, would you do it? Yeah. That's one. Yeah. Number two, and that's actually something I'm thinking about as we speak. Think about the marketing aspect of it. If you're a small shop, and you're the only one in your region, your town, your strip area, in kind of the, that kind of region of other shops and dealerships, because they stick around each other, you can start offering free scans. Winter is coming. Come and look at your tires. Come get a free scan. And obviously, whatever you find is your business. So it's a really good opportunity to grow your business as well.
I agree, 100%. How can they find out more? Our listeners, if they want to learn more about this and they think, hey, this is going to be a good fit for me, how can they find out more and who do they contact?
This is a no-brainer for the bigger tire shops.
Yeah.
If you've got enough bays, if you have a 10-bay shop and you haven't scaled the 200-plus cars, I don't know. This makes more sense than the drive-through alignment check thing. You know what I'm talking about? That drive-through alignment deal. For sure. Because this can scan way more stuff. You're going to be able to find a ton more junk. And it 100%, you're right on the marketing thing. You present this scan, underbody scan, and all of the pictures. You're seeing all of this technology. You just leveled up to a completely
That's what I'm
different
thinking, right?
plane.
Like that's how I'm thinking I could utilize something like that.
This isn't even like DVI. This is like DVI on steroids. You know what I'm saying? But then you triage it. I'm just thinking out loud. Yaron, you can ignore us. Now you triage it at this point because now you're like, hey, this needs to go to a more skilled technician to dig a little deeper. But here's the why. Here's all this evidence. Here's why we're telling you this. Look at all these cool pictures and all this analysis that this AI has done. It needs to go to this other technician. They need to tear into it. And then the customer's going to be like, well, yeah, that makes sense. Do you have a full car scanner? Other shop? No. Well, this other shop does, and they told me it needs X, Y, and Z. So I don't know. That's cool.
And they even get it on their phone, right? They leave with, they leave with a scan. So it doesn't have to be for free. You can just charge $20-$30 for a scan. And then if you want to refer them to someone else, great. You want to refer them to a body shop, great.
But the thing is, we're doing them for free already. We're like, we roll it into the cost of the thing. We're just eating the 20, 30, 40 minutes that it's taking for them to tear into the car and do things like air filter checks and fluid checks and stuff like that. Well, what if I can cut that down in half? And instead of it being 30 minutes, it's 10. Why? Because the tire check, the undercar stuff, the leak checks all been done. Like, I don't have to do anything else. And hey, what are you doing into? Hey, just poke. Once you have the car on the lift, you're doing the oil change. You put the car on the lift, check the brake depth, and check to see if it needs a wheel off inspection. Spin the tires, see if it needs a wheel bearing, and do the underhood stuff, and then get it out of here.
And I'm done.
I
don't have to take the pictures. I don't have to.
Yeah, you've just cut down on like the walk around time. So the service advisor is no longer doing the walk around time. Your QC person doesn't need to do the QC. They just need to do a drive through. Hey, let's do a drive through. Make sure we don't find anything new, any additional scratches or anything weird like that. So now you just got rid of your QC person. They're fired. Now you got rid of at least one service advisor. They're fired. No, we're replacing them all with robots and AI. Screw that. People are awful. Employees are the worst. They're so expensive. So now you just fired all those people.
I have to say that not a single person was fired due to UVI to date, and no, I'm not even joking. That's a very important thing for us.
Due to UVI
exactly. But you're talking about service and time of inspection, which is very much your pain points. But we have a dealer in Pennsylvania that they're selling $89 a scan if you buy a trade in another place. So you take a trade for a test drive and say, come get it through our scanner because we have this, and pay us $89 before you buy the car, or after if it's some kind of auction that you bought it for. So there's a lot of ideas. And just Lucas, to your question earlier, so I don't forget. So the way to find more info is just to go online to uvi.com, so uveye.com, or drop us an email at info@uvi.com. But if you go to the website, you'll find all the information. You'll see a system. You'll see the measurements. You'll see videos of other kind of shops using it and how they use it for service, for sales, for BDC, for marketing, for a whole bunch of ways. There's incentive programs for GM and Volvo dealerships, which is really cool. Okay. So they help subsidize this. Yeah,
I really, really, really want to see you at Apex, and I really, really want to see you at ETI Tooltech. I think that those two places, I think that would completely shape your organization, and I think it would help shape our industry in a different way. I think if you were at those two shows, if nothing else, I think it would change the way that the automotive business does business. I really do.
Okay. We'll look into that for sure.
Yes, sir. All right. Sounds good. Thank you for being here, brother.